AP1 stands for the additional protocol to the Geneva Convention. So most people, when they hear the Geneva Conventions, they think of the World War II Geneva Conventions, which were from 1929, or the ones that have been governing for the most part since then, which were drafted right after World War II. Then in the 70s, in the midst of these wars of liberation and decolonization, and Vietnam was a very important effect, most of the countries of the world got together and drafted these new Geneva Conventions on top of the existing ones called the Additional Protocol. And one thing in writing this book, and one reason we reject the idea that any of these rules should guide how the United States thinks about these new weapons, is they were very much the product of this kind of pro-third world, pro-guerilla, pro-terrorist movement that was very much an effort designed to try to constrain the Western powers, constrain the use of technology, because it was thought to give the West an unfair advantage. And so in the end, actually, the United States refused to ratify that treaty. It was, I think, a very important decision made by President Reagan. It's hard to believe, but back in the day, the Washington Post and the New York Times praised Reagan, which happened very rarely back then, and probably rarely today, for saying, we're not going to sign a treaty that gives terrorists and guerrilla fighters the same protections and rights as our soldiers who follow the usual rules of war. And so we, in our book, we say people should understand that when they hear, the Geneva Conventions of this variation or the laws of war, they often have this ideological mission behind them, which they didn't used to have when the rules for war were set by, as we said, the countries that fought the wars, not sort of all the third world countries or the developing world, as we call it now, getting together and trying to regulate war.
Be sure to check out John's book, Striking Power: How Cyber, Robots, and Space Weapons Change the Rules of War.